program is supported by PMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Hello, CJ.
Hello, Alma, and good evening to everyone watching the news tonight. Here are the headlines.
Tensions are boiling over in Minneapolis as the city wrestles with the fallout of yet another deadly police-involved incident that has left a young black man dead.
Japan will release more than 1 million tons of treated water from the stricken Fukushima nuclear plant into the ocean. The government announces, triggering a furious reaction from China and fierce opposition from local fishing communities.
Top U.S. health authorities recommended a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine out of an abundance of caution as they investigate any links between it and blood clots, according to a regulator today.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that there is no threat more dangerous and pressing than the one Iran poses during a joint press conference with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at the Premier's office in Jerusalem.
First, in our news to the U.S., tensions are boiling over in Minneapolis as the city wrestles with the fallout of yet another deadly police-involved incident that has left a young black man dead. The policewoman who shot a 20-year-old black man in a Minneapolis suburb accidentally confused her handgun with her taser, according to Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon, fueling tensions in a city already on edge because of the George Floyd murder trial. Gannon showed reporters police body cam video of the shooting. Again, fair warning to our viewers who may find this video very disturbing. Take a look.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
As I watched the video and listened to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge that resulted in the tragic death of Mr. Wright.
While we await additional information from the BCA, which is leading this investigation, we continue to support members of our community as they gather peacefully amid our calls for transparency and accountability. Let me be clear. We will get to the bottom of this. We will do all that is within our power to make sure that justice is done for Daunte Wright.
The released video begins minutes into the stop and shows police walking up to the car, and then Wright has been seen stepping out of his vehicle. Police then tried to take Wright into custody after discovering he has an outstanding warrant. The video shows Wright begins to resist as cuffs are placed on him, and he gets back into the vehicle as Wright scuffles with officers and gets back to the driver's seat of the car. A female police officer, as you heard her earlier, shouting, "I'll tase you," and then taser, taser, taser. National Guard troops were deployed, and Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott imposed an overnight curfew The Minnesota Twins announced they were also postponing their game on Monday against the Boston Red Sox out of respect for the tragic events that occurred yesterday in Brooklyn Center.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday called the shooting of a black motorist by police tragic, but warned that violent protests were unjustifiable. Watch this.
The question is, was it an accident? Was it intentional? That remains to be determined by a full-blown investigation. But in the meantime, I want to make it clear again, there is absolutely no justification, none, for looting, no justification for violence. Peaceful protest, understandable. You all watched, I assume as I did, the film, which is fairly, the body cam, which is fairly graphic. In the meantime, we're calling for peace and calm, and we should listen to Daunte's mom, who is calling for peace and calm.
After that, President Biden tweeted this message, quote, "Today I'm thinking about Daunte Wright and his family and the pain, anger, and drama Black America experiences every day. While we await a full investigation, we know what we need to do to move forward, rebuild trust, and ensure accountability so no one is above the law." Sporting fixtures in Minnesota were called off Monday as tensions in the city simmered in the wake of the fatal police shooting of a black man in a Minneapolis suburb. Basketball, baseball, and ice hockey games were all postponed following the shooting. Authorities in Minneapolis and surrounding suburbs, including Brooklyn Center, announced a curfew from 7 p.m. Monday until 6 a.m. Tuesday.
Staying in the U.S., earlier, Dr. Jonathan Rich, a cardiologist, testified that George Floyd died from cardiac arrest and that his death was preventable. His testimony echoed a series of medical experts who testified that Floyd died because of the officer's actions. Take a look.
In this case, Mr. George Floyd died from a cardiopulmonary arrest. It was caused by low oxygen levels, and those low oxygen levels were induced by the prone restraint and positional asphyxiation that he was subjected to. As far as I can tell from reviewing all of the facts of the case, I see no evidence at all to suggest that a fentanyl overdose caused Mr. Floyd's death. After reviewing all of the facts and evidence of the case, I can state with a high degree of medical certainty that George Floyd did not die from a primary cardiac event, and he did not die from a drug overdose.
So Dr. Rich, then, taking into account all of the evidence that you reviewed, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Mr. Floyd's death was preventable?
Yes, I do.
Would you tell us what that opinion is?
Yes, I believe that Mr. George Floyd's death was absolutely preventable. So, had he not been restrained in the way in which he was, I think he would have survived that day. I think he would have gone home or wherever he was going to go had he not been subjected to the prone and positional restraint that he was.
Staying on that story, another one who testified is not an expert. He only testified on what it's like to lose a brother. George Floyd's brother, Philonise Floyd, breaks down as he testifies in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. Watch this.
I was married. And May 24th, I got married. And my brother was killed May 25th. And my mom died on May 30th. So it's like a bittersweet month because I'm supposed to be happy when that month comes. And when George, he had found out that my mom was passing because she had to stay with us for hospice, and he was talking to her over the phone, but she perished before he even came down here. When we went to the funeral, it's just, George just sat there at the casket over and over again. He would just say, "Mama, Mama," over and over again. And I didn't know what to tell him because I was in pain too. We all were hurting.
Staying in the U.S., one person was killed and a police officer wounded in a shooting at a high school in the U.S. state of Tennessee on Monday, according to police. Knoxville City police said on Twitter, multiple gunshot victims had been reported at Austin East Magnet High School, before adding in a statement read out on local television that one of the injured had died. The Knoxville Police Department said officers had responded to reports of a male subject who was possibly armed in the school. City authorities instructed families to gather at a baseball stadium near the school. The U.S. has been plagued by school shootings since the massacre at Columbine in the state of Colorado in April 1999. Monday's shooting in Tennessee comes on the heels of President Joe Biden unveiling proposals to expand gun control. President Biden branded gun violence an epidemic and an international embarrassment during his April 8 speech.
In other news, in a statement read by a UN spokesperson, the Secretary General reiterated his deep concern about the developments in Myanmar, adding that the most recent reports of violence and killings by security forces are appalling. Here's UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric.
Turning to Myanmar, I can tell you that the Secretary General reiterates his deep concern about the developments in that country. The most recent reports of violence and killings by security forces are appalling. The Security Council has clearly called for a stop to the violence and invited the parties to pursue dialogue and reconciliation. The Secretary General encourages all member states to use their influence to impress on the parties the need to stop this escalation and to take steps that will facilitate the return to civilian rule. He emphasizes that the key role that the region can and must play in advising the national actors to take steps towards the return of peace and stability in Myanmar. The United Nations Special Envoy Christina Schreiner-Bergener is currently in the region, where she is meeting with key interlocutors in order to promote an effective international response based on a unified regional effort. She remains ready to visit Myanmar at the earliest opportunity. From Myanmar, our colleagues there said they are appalled by the violence since February, in which some 93 protesters were reportedly killed, many of them in the city of Bago. The UN team there says, the UN team in Myanmar says it is particularly concerned over reports of the use of heavy artillery against protesters. The UN Human Rights Office says that as of today, credible reports show at least 707 people having been killed since the military seized control of the government more than 2 months ago. It is believed this may be significantly higher. Since February 1st, thousands of people have been injured, and many of them seriously.
The country has been rocked by daily protests since the military seized power on February 1, and the authorities have launched a bloody crackdown on dissent, with hundreds killed and more than 2,500 arrested. State media reported Friday that 19 people have been sentenced to death for robbery and murder by a military court, with 17 of them tried in absentia. They were arrested in Yangon's North Okalapa Township, one of 6 areas in the commercial hub currently under martial law, meaning anybody arrested there is tried by a military tribunal. The 6 townships are home to about 2 million people, more than a quarter of Yangon's sprawling population. While Myanmar has long had the death penalty in its penal code, the country has not carried out any execution in over 30 years, said Phil Robertson, Deputy Director of the Asia Division for Human Rights Watch. He added trying cases in a military court means there can be no appeals and there are no guarantees of a free and fair trial in any way, shape, or form. The sentences could be a tactic to force protesters off the streets and back to work, he said, as a nationwide boycott has brought much of Myanmar's economy to a halt.
Here in the Philippines, the Foreign Ministry said it had confronted Beijing's envoy over the illegal lingering of Chinese boats at a contested reef in the South China Sea, stepping up the diplomatic role. 9 vessels are still at the reef, Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin said on Twitter, citing a government agency. Many of the boats have scattered across the Spratly archipelago. Come, come, time to go, Locsin tweeted. While it may well be traditional fishing grounds, tradition yields to law. In a rare move, the Philippine Foreign Affairs Department summoned the Chinese ambassador, Wang Shilian, on Monday to express its utmost displeasure over the issue. The last time the Foreign Ministry summoned a Chinese ambassador was in June 2019 after a Chinese vessel sank a Filipino fishing boat at Reed Bank and left the crew at sea, according to the ministry. Several countries have expressed concerns over the renewed tension in the region. The U.S., a key military ally of the Philippines and its former colonial master, reminded China last week of its treaty obligations to Manila in the event of an attack in the waters. Hundreds of soldiers from U.S. and Philippine forces are also currently holding joint military drills in the Southeast Asian country. It repeated its demand for the immediate departure of all Chinese boats from Philippine waters, according to the statement of the department.
Staying here in the Philippines, where President Rodrigo Duterte's remarks about waiving his COVID-19 vaccination slot was his personal conviction that may change when more vaccine supplies arrive in the country, according to Malacanang. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this clarification after Duterte, in a public address late Monday night, said he is willing to give up his slot to those who need the vaccine to live productively. Watch this.
Well, panandali ang sentimiento po ni Presidente yung sinabi niyang kahapon na habang hindi pa sapat po ang mga bakuna, hahayaan na muna niya na mauna ang ating mga kababayan bago siya. So I hope that will change po dahil parating naman po yung mas maraming mga supply lalo na sa mga buwan ng Mayo at ng Hunyo. Importante naman po talaga ang vaccine confidence. Pero nakikita po natin ngayon, no, dahil limitado rin ang ating supply, hindi po problema ngayon ang vaccine confidence. No? So siguro po pag talagang dumagsana yung ating supply at kinakailangan madaliin na talaga ang pagbabakuna sa lahat, yun po yung panahon na magpapabakuna ang ating Presidente.
Meanwhile, President Duterte and Russian President Vladimir Putin had a telesummit on Tuesday and discussed ways to help each nation defeat the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Malacanang. In a virtual presser, Secretary Harry Roque earlier confirmed that the president's schedule is classified as secret. Let's listen in.
Well, since nanggaling na rin po naman kay Senator Bongo, paunawa po kasi ang schedule po talaga ni Presidente classified as secret. No? Pero since sinabi na rin naman ni Senator Bongo, I can confirm, may usapan po sa telepono ang ating Presidente at ang Presidente ng Russia. So yun lang po ang aking masasabi. I cannot even say kung kailan po. No? Pero that is because it was previously mentioned already by Senator Bongo.
In a statement, the palace said President Duterte's open and productive phone conversation with President Putin lasted about 30 minutes. President Duterte and President Putin reaffirmed their shared commitment to further enhance cooperation as the Philippines and Russia commemorate the 45th anniversary of diplomatic relations this year and vowed to cooperate in the fight against COVID-19, according to the palace statement. It was on June 2, 1976, when the Philippines forged formal diplomatic ties with the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Malacanang said President Duterte was thankful to President Putin for Russia's commitment to bolster its cooperation with the Philippines in combating the pandemic. The two leaders discussed the global and regional vaccine landscapes and also emphasized the need to mobilize vaccines like Russia's Sputnik V to as many countries as possible. Malacanang added that the president told President Putin about the Philippines' plan to order 20 million doses of Sputnik V vaccine from Russia. Malacanang said President Putin and President Duterte also tackled the two countries' greater cooperation in various fields like defense and cooperation, trade and investments, agriculture, energy, and politics. President Duterte also reiterated his invitation for the Russian president to visit the Philippines as soon as circumstances allow. And Malacanang said President Putin welcomed President Duterte's renewed invitation.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Tuesday told Russia to end its unjustifiable military buildup around Ukraine as Kyiv and Washington's top diplomats gathered for talks in Brussels. Concern is mounting that the long-simmering conflict in East Ukraine could spiral back into wider fighting after reports of major Russian troop movements and an intensification of clashes with Moscow-backed separatists. Watch this.
Russia's considerable military buildup is unjustified, unexplained, and deeply concerning. Russia must end this military buildup in and around Ukraine, stop its provocations, and de-escalate immediately.
Дальше тоді вже запрос на режим припинення вогню.
Ukraine, which applied to join the U.S.-backed alliance in 2008, is pressing Western powers for practical support as it seeks to deter any new aggression from Moscow. Moscow on Tuesday accused the U.S. and other NATO countries of turning Ukraine into a powder keg. If there is any aggravation, we, of course, will do everything to ensure our security and the safety of our citizens wherever they are, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov was quoted as saying by Russian news agencies. According to RT News, Russia has denied that troop movements are in preparation for war, with presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov noting that soldiers move around regularly to be in areas where they are deemed necessary and expedient. Russia has never threatened, that is not threatening anyone and poses no threat to anyone, he said.
Meanwhile, self-tests or auto-tests were rolled out in Swiss pharmacies for free. Live with us is Bayan Glosser. Hello, man.
Hi, Alma. Yes, indeed. So because of the constant threat of COVID-19, Switzerland, like all other countries, keeps on looking for efficient ways to curb and fight against the virus. One of them is screening tests, and up until last April 7, the country relied upon PCR tests in the medical field and rapid tests in the pharmacies. Considering these are not enough, the Confederation followed the step of Austria, Germany, and United Kingdom in launching the third pillar of strategy of this massive screening test, the rapid auto-test. 5 of these are made available and free per month and per person in all pharmacies of the country on presentation of health insurance card. They can be simply used at home and can provide a result in a span of few minutes. However, as these tests are not as efficient and reliable as the last two mentioned, these are only destined to be used to curb the spread of the virus within private sphere and when we don't have any symptoms. For example, before welcoming a friend at home. So even though the result from it is negative, social distancing and wearing a mask must still be applied. A negative result is valid for 24 hours, so afterwards a new test can be used. But in case of symptoms, it is rather recommended to do PCR tests with a more reliable result. Back to you, Alma.
So, man, if these tests are not reliable, as you say, as the PCR test, then why are they that useful?
Well, you know, Alma, it is known that in Switzerland, 2/3 of the population have not been yet tested. For instance, people don't necessarily think of doing a test before going out and meeting other people. So having this auto test in hand will allow them to test themselves instantly without requiring a healthcare professional, and to encourage them staying at home for quarantine in case of a positive result, which will help in curbing the virus spread. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Man, for your updates. Looking forward to more updates coming out of Switzerland. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Thank you for having me also, Alma. I'm Mayan Goza reporting from the Geneva, Switzerland Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Now, top U.S. health authorities recommended a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine out of an abundance of caution as they investigate any links between it and blood clots, a regulator said Tuesday. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control are assessing the potential significance of 6 reported cases of a rare blood clot in patients who have received the shot, according to a tweet by the FDA. Until that process is complete, we are recommending this pause, it said. The regulator said that as of Monday, more than 6.8 million doses of the J&J vaccine had been administered in the U.S. CDC, FDA are reviewing data involving 6 reported U.S. cases of a rare severe type of blood clot in individuals after receiving the vaccine. Right now, these adverse effects appear to be extremely rare, the FDA stated on Twitter. The statement came days after the European Union's drug regulator said it is also reviewing possible blood clot cases in people given the J&J shot.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a long way from over, according to WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, as 4.4 million cases were reported globally to WHO last week, the 4th highest number in a single week so far. The WHO also said that the world has now seen 7 consecutive weeks of rising infections. Take a look.
In January and February, the world saw 6 consecutive weeks of declining cases. We have now seen 7 consecutive weeks of increasing cases and 4 weeks of increasing deaths. Last week was the 4th highest number of cases in a single week so far. Make no mistake, vaccines are a vital and powerful tool, but they are not the only tool. We say this day after day, week after week, and we will keep saying it. Physical distancing works, masks work, hand hygiene works, ventilation works, surveillance, testing, contact tracing, isolation, supportive quarantine, and compassionate care. They all work to stop infections and save lives. Right now, intensive care units in many countries are overflowing and people are dying. This pandemic is a long way from over. But we have many reasons for optimism. The decline in cases and deaths during the first 2 months of the year shows that this virus and its variants can be stopped.
Per week. Last week we had 4.4 million cases. If you look on our website and you actually look at the epi curve and the trajectory of the pandemic right now, it is growing exponentially. This is not the situation we want to be in 16 months into a pandemic where we have proven control measures. It is time right now where everyone has to take stock and have a reality check about what we need to be doing. There was a 9% increase in transmission last week. 7th consecutive week where we've seen an increase in transmission and a 5% increase in deaths. This is not the direction we need to be going, and we really need to be serious about this. It is vaccines, but it's not vaccines only, it's vaccines and. What can you be doing every day? What can we be doing to keep yourself safe and your loved ones safe?
Now, the German government agreed Tuesday on controversial changes to a national infections control law, handing Berlin more power to impose tougher measures such as nighttime curfews to halt the raging coronavirus pandemic. The adjusted law, which still needs to be approved by Parliament, would allow Chancellor Angela Merkel's government to impose curfews from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. and close schools and businesses in areas with high infection rates. Currently, restrictions are decided on in consultation with Berlin and, in theory, implemented by the federal states. The adjusted law agreed by Cabinet on Tuesday would give Berlin the power to enforce this emergency break. In hard-hit areas, curfews will be imposed between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. with exceptions for medical emergencies and those leaving their home for professional reasons. Non-essential shops and cultural venues will have to remain closed, while private gatherings will be allowed only between a single household and one other person. The law would also see Berlin force schools, usually strictly within the remit of the federal states, to revert to virtual teaching if the 7-day incidence rate exceeds 200 cases per 100,000 people. Cabinet also approved a new rule obliging employers to provide a weekly test to people who were unable to work from home. Germany has now reported more than 3 million cases. The director of the country's Intensive Care Association says the healthcare system is on the verge of breaking down.
In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that there is none at the Premier's office in Jerusalem. Let's listen in.
Calls for Israel. In the Middle East, there is no threat that is more serious, more dangerous, more pressing than that posed by the fanatical regime in Iran. Iran continues to support terrorists around the world in 5 continents, threatening civilians everywhere. Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them. And Iran consistently and outrageously calls for Israel's annihilation and works towards that goal. Mr. Secretary, we both know the horrors of war. We both understand the importance of preventing war, and we both agree that Iran must never possess nuclear weapons. My policy as Prime Minister of Israel is clear. I will never allow Iran to obtain the nuclear capability to carry out its genocidal goal of eliminating Israel. And Israel will continue to defend itself against Iran's aggression and terrorism.
Now, the two met hours after Iran charged that Israel was responsible for an attack on its Natanz uranium enrichment plant on Sunday. Iran charged on Monday that its arch-enemy Israel was behind the attack on Natanz uranium enrichment plant and vowed it would take revenge and ramp up its nuclear activities. The latest of a string of incidents hitting Iran's nuclear program came days after talks resumed to salvage the battered 2015 Iranian nuclear deal that former President Donald Trump abandoned. Israel didn't claim responsibility for the incident, but unsourced media reports in the country attributed it to the Israeli security services carrying out a cyber operation. The New York Times, quoting unnamed U.S. and Israeli intelligence officials, also said there had been an Israeli role in the attack. It reported that a large explosion had completely destroyed the power system, which fed the site's underground centrifuges. And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
This portion is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back to the news. Japan will release more than 1 million tons of treated water from the stricken Fukushima nuclear plant into the ocean, the government said Tuesday, triggering a furious regional reaction and fierce opposition from local fishing communities. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga told a ministerial meeting that disposing of the water was an inevitable task in a decades-long process of decommissioning the nuclear plant. Watch this.
基準をはるかに上回る安全性を確保し、政府を挙げて風評対策を徹底することを前提に、海洋放出が現実的と判断し、基本方針を取りまとめました。
Japan's government argues the release is safe because the water is processed to remove almost all radioactive elements and will be diluted. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, has endorsed the release, which it says is similar to the disposal of wastewater at nuclear plants elsewhere. Around 1.25 million tons of water have accumulated in tanks at the nuclear plant, which was crippled after going into meltdown following the 2011 tsunami. It includes water used to cool the plant, as well as rain and groundwater that seeps in daily. An intensive or extensive pumping and filtration system extracts tons of newly contaminated water each day and filters out most radioactive elements. But local fishing communities fear releasing the water will undermine years of work to restore confidence in their seafood.
Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry slammed Japan's decision, saying it had been taken without regard for domestic and foreign doubts and opposition. The foreign ministry spokesperson urges Japan to recognize its own responsibilities and respond to the concerns of various stakeholders. Take a look.
日本应重新审视福岛核电站核废水处置问题，在同各利益攸关国家和国际原子能机构充分协商并达成一致之前，不得擅自启动排海。中方将继续同国际社会一道，密切关注事态发展，并保留作出进一步反应的权利。
South Korea's foreign ministry also called it a risk to the maritime environment and later announced it had summoned Japan's ambassador. The U.S. State Department, however, said Japan had been transparent about its decision and appears to have adopted an approach in accordance with globally accepted nuclear safety standards. Debate over how to handle the water has dragged on for years as space to store it at the site runs out. A government panel earlier endorsed either diluting the treated water and releasing it into the ocean or releasing it as vapor. And the IAEA says either option is acceptable.
In other news, India has authorized the Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine, a leading local drug maker said Tuesday, in a boost for the nation's inoculation drive as infection rates soar to record highs. Russia's Sputnik V is the third vaccine to be approved by India after the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and Covaxin, which was developed by Indian firm Bharat Biotech. Prasad, co-chair of pharmaceutical company Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, in a statement said, with the rising cases in India, vaccination is the most effective tool in our battle against COVID-19. India on Monday overtook Brazil as the country with the second highest number of coronavirus infections as it reported a new daily record of more than 168,000 cases. The vast nation of 1.3 billion people has been reporting a rapid increase in new infections in recent weeks, with the surge taking the total toll to 13.5 million cases, above Brazil's 13.48 million. Experts have warned that huge, mostly maskless and tightly packed crowds at political rallies in coal-bound states, mass religious festivals, and at other public places were fueling the new wave of infections.
Austria's health minister announced Tuesday he would resign as he was overworked and exhausted managing the coronavirus crisis. Rudolf Anschober became health minister early last year when his Green Party formed an unlikely coalition with Chancellor Sebastian Kurz's Conservatives just before coronavirus started spreading rapidly in Europe. He said, "I've decided to resign from my job," the 60-year-old told reporters. "I am overworked and powered out," he said, adding that 15 months on the job had felt like 15 years. He warned the pandemic was still in full swing and should not be underestimated. He said he had suffered circulation problems and he had seen his profile rise rapidly during his crisis, even eclipsing the popularity of his own boss mid last year as Austria managed to keep the pandemic relatively at bay during the first wave.
Es ist jetzt gut 15 Monate aus, da habe ich eine
Eagle News will be back for more updates. Please don't go away.
Sa panahon na laganap ang mga sakit, katuwang nyo ang BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Gawa sa state-of-the-art facilities ang BMEG Premium Feeds. Kaya ito ay safe, sanitized, and hygienic. Walang dalang sakit, certified, malinis, sariwa at sigurado. At para laging malinis ang paligid, gumamit ng Protect Plus Gold. Isang safe broad-spectrum disinfectant na pumapatay ng mga virus, bacteria at fungi. BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. Britain's economy rebounded slightly in February despite coronavirus curbs, while exports of goods to the European Union recovered a bit more, data showed Tuesday, sparking optimism over the outlook. Gross domestic product rose by 0.4% in February after shrinking by 2.2% in January, the Office for National Statistics said in a statement, noting a boost in industrial output and consumer spending. Activity grew despite England's latest COVID-19 lockdown, which was implemented in early January but partially eased this week on the back of a rapid vaccination drive. From Monday, pubs were allowed to serve drinks outside, and non-essential retailers and hairdressers reopened as well. The phased reopening, in tandem with speedy vaccinations, has sparked hopes for a rebound in economic activity in the current second quarter, or 3 months to June.
Asian ride-hailing company Grab plans a U.S. listing after merging with the investment fund Altimeter Capital Management in an operation that values Grab at $39.6 billion, according to the company in a statement. The listing, planned in the coming months on the NASDAQ exchange, would be the biggest global market launch via a special purpose acquisition company. A statement issued by the Singapore-based company said, if successful, it should provide Grab with $4.5 billion in fresh funds. The deal would involve Grab, a popular ride-hailing company that also delivers meals and provides financial services, merging with what is sometimes called a blank check vehicle that is already listed and whose business consists of helping stock market flotations. The so-called SPAC model has become a favored way of managing such listings because they are faster and less expensive than classic stock flotations.
In other business news, Bitcoin hit a record high above $62,000 Tuesday as the cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase prepares to launch shares on Wall Street. Bitcoin reached $62,377, a huge gain of 114% since the start of the year. After crashing in 2018, the value of Bitcoin rebounded and it has set records since late last year, rocketing from around $12,000 in October to more than $60,000 a month ago. The arrival Wednesday of cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase on the NASDAQ is one of Wall Street's most anticipated events of the year, even though some questions whether the cryptocurrency market is sustainable. Estimates of Coinbase's value vary depending on how it is calculated, but its capitalization is expected to range from $70 to $100 billion. That would make it the largest initial public offer for a U.S. company since Facebook in 2012. Founded in 2012, the platform allows users to buy and sell about 50 cryptocurrencies. The cryptocurrency market has grown exponentially in 2021 and is now worth a staggering $2.0 trillion as it increasingly attracts interest from big names on Wall Street.
Okay, to other news now. The Chester Zoo is implementing COVID-safe measures to reopen as lockdown restrictions are partially lifted across England, with tickets for the first week of the reopening already sold out. More than 5,000 people are expected to visit the most famous attraction each day as the zoo hopes to recover from losses caused by the pandemic. Take a look.
We're finally opening. You know, we've been closed since the 4th of January under lockdown 3, and the government today, 12th of April, has allowed us to reopen. So we've got around about 5,500 people expected at the zoo from 10 o'clock today. Hopefully that means we'll now be able to stay open right throughout the year. It's been a long time since we've opened. We think we've lost, as an organisation, around £11.5 million since lockdown 1, since March 2020, and 97% of our income comes from people coming through the gate. So to be able to get back open today means we can start doing the work again that we've had to put on hold over the last year. Well, things will be a little bit different when people come to the zoo today. You know, we're a COVID-secure site, which means that we have to restrict our numbers coming into Chester Zoo to make sure that people remain socially distanced, that they're safe when they're here. So there won't be as many people in the zoo. That's the first thing that people will see. We've also got lots of hand sanitisation stations around the zoo. We've got lots of wash hand basins so people can keep their hands clean as they're walking around the zoo. We've also got a safety team here at the zoo to make sure that people adhere to the guidance, but also to reassure the public as they're walking around the 128 acres of the zoo here.
It's a bit unusual for the animals. We've been, shut down for a few months now. Everything's been so quiet. And then today's the big day when, people come back into the zoo. I think we're expected like 5,000 or 6,000 people in today. So it'll be a bit of a shock, possibly. We're just fortunate that a lot of our rhinos here, they're nice and calm and they're well used to, people being in the zoo. So fingers crossed they'll be okay.
According to the Standard, while the zoo has been able to reopen, it is still looking to recoup some of the money lost over the last year from the government Zoo Animals Fund. However, due to the overly strict criteria set by the government, currently only £5.5 million of the £100 million has been handed out to UK zoos and aquariums. Chester Zoo CEO Jamie Christen said the zoo will keep lobbying, along with the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums, to the government for more attractions to be eligible to claim a share of the funding.
Finally, in our news, in Cape Town, a handful of purists practice body surfing, a type of surfing without boards or bragging, the closest you can possibly get to the waves. It is a little-known sport which historians trace back to the origins of surfing. Watch this.
Wave and stay. At first glance, this is a typical early morning scene out in the bay in Cape Town. But these are not your average surfers. Using little more than their bodies in a wetsuit, boards nowhere to be seen, these are body surfers.
Freedom. Absolute freedom. Just you and the surf. Figure out where you have to be, what you have to do, and just ride the wave, ride the ocean. It's about being just you in the sea. It's great.
Just a child, yeah? Just nothing serious about it. Just fun.
Some body surfers use small paddles in the water to better navigate a wave and stay stable. But in this stripped-back sport, you can never blame a bad session on the equipment.
I think it's more about positioning, putting yourself in the right position to catch the wave, and you're in the right position on the wave. Yeah.
The simplicity of body surfing makes it a good bet for the oldest water gliding sport.
From what we know, body surfing has a long history into pre-colonial Polynesian culture and even into pre-colonial African culture, the coastal cultures, which have documented ships' records when the Europeans were coming to do the early voyage of discovery and starting to trade along the west coast of Africa.
When he isn't in the water, Quibis Yobert makes surfboards, bodyboards and hand slides, the small paddles used by some body surfers. Even if they sell well, the market is small compared to classic surfing, and big brands have no real interest in the sport.
I think it's just that the big companies, the big corporates have not really discovered it. I think it's too basic, it's too simple. And in my words, it's too pure for them. Because there's too little product. There's too little, probably, profit for them to make.
Body surfing remains a low-key activity, far removed from the glamorous and trendy image of surfing. And that is exactly what Niels Havenhar loves about it. He is the only surfer out on this reef for the day.
I guess I've always liked it because there's less people do it. So it's not as crowded. It's easier.
And it's safer.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Have you ever done it? You should.
Looks exciting.
It's a no for me. It looks really fun.
Rafu does that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's already hard to get on the board and stay on the board with, large waves, but I don't think I'm going to do that. No body surfing for me.
I don't think I can do that anymore.
Yeah, it's too scary. It's too scary. Okay, well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow.
Yes, we'll see you back tomorrow. And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
Since lockdown 1 since March 2020, and 97% of our income comes from people coming through the.
This program at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Ang layunin ng UNLAD, Kaagapay sa Hanap Buhay, itong programang ito, sa pangunguna ng ating tagapamahalang pangkalahatan ng kapatid